It's journalism. Journalism's dead. Now we have a lot of journalists helping train the AI that is, in many cases, being used to put them out of a job. And it feels a little... it doesn't feel great to me.
I have a sister who's a NBC news anchor, and so I can tell you that they are definitely talking about AI, and that community is very concerned that we don't know how much longer this is going to last. It feels like it's being replaced. They feel like they're seeing jobs go away in the journalism industry.
They might be self-aware.
Do you listen to audiobooks? Are they a thing for you? An Audible subscriber?
Yes and no in that order.
Yes and no. You don't like
Audible? Yes, I listen to audiobooks. No, I don't have an Audible subscription.
You hate Audible. Who hates
I
Audible?
don't like that Audible takes the largest share of everyone's money. And so if I'm going to give it to one of the larger platforms, it's usually like Spotify, which,
Oh, that's a good point.
It's better than what Audible is giving percentage-wise to the authors.
Well, it's included in your Spotify membership now.
Depends on the book. And same thing for Audible. If you have an Audible, whatever subscription, there's a gigantic library of, you just get this one for free along with it. It's usually not your big new releases. Maybe there's like one or two in there that they'll do.
I really like Audible, but it's like a credit card benefit. One of my credit cards gives you free Audible, so that's fun. Why I have it. But it does bring up a good AI topic. And you mentioned Spotify, and I have listened to audiobooks on Spotify too, because again, they're included if you have like their paid subscription for music. Spotify just announced that they are officially going to be accepting audiobooks that have been narrated by AI. And I think we've mentioned 11 Labs before on this podcast. You've played with them some. The OpenAI Super Bowl ad that we put out not too long ago. That was narrated by 11 Labs narration. And apparently
what is 11 Labs, for those who aren't familiar?
Well, they're an AI company, and they seem to specialize in narration or voice, text to voice, but they have all these different voices that you can use, and you can even train your own, something we should try
and you can give it direction of make sure that this is more dramatic, or make sure that this is in a pleading voice, or whatever it ends up being. They are generally considered to be one of the best out there of making new voices or cloning existing voices and, like narration. So yes, it makes sense that a next step for them would be audiobooks.
Yeah, well, they've been in the audiobook space for quite some time. They've had tools. They have tools where you can upload your book and you can say which characters and assign voices to those characters, and it will, effectively produce your whole audiobook for you in the tap of a button. But this new thing is that Spotify has now announced a partnership with them. So it's like one-click upload from 11 Labs into Spotify, publish your audiobook. And
a lot of people make a living, though, based off of being
voice
narrators. Voice actors, exactly. Whether it be for cartoons or movies or audiobooks or whatever as the case may be.
This is true. And I do think that they are still, on average, better than the AI. The degree to which they can, dramatize the material that's being read. And create a compelling delivery. Also on Audible and I guess Spotify as well, some audiobooks have richer production in there, or there's some music and some sound effects going on.
I've listened to some books with that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. But it seems like there's a fairly compelling argument that it's on its way out. And these voice actors can certainly license their voices, but that's a one-time payday, and it probably ain't that big.
I agree. And I think that this doesn't need to, we're obviously headed sort of is this not a doom and gloom scenario discussion, to which I think the answer broadly is yes. But it doesn't need to all be bad, because there are only so many professional voice actors out there. There's only so many people who want to and have the chops to do this as a job. And there's more being written, whether by people or AI, than can be narrated. And a lot of things that could be narrated by people aren't being, because it doesn't seem like an appropriate fit, or because there aren't enough people in a given source language that can do it. There could be only so many people that are professional Swahili audiobook narrators, for example. I just picked a language. And if there's only so many people that are doing that, you can only get through the backlog of the absolute most popular books coming out per year per person. You could have someone who is every day, they're throwing throat lozenges like they're Tic Tacs, just trying to keep that voice prime and get as many audiobooks out as possible, and they couldn't keep up. I do think that a legitimate or more legitimate use of AI in this sort of space would be, you're not licensing your voice to just go away forever and it'll do everything. Why not let you continue to work on one language or on specific projects that you think need the human touch, or on even touch up of what the AI did based off of your voice, but also doing extra languages. And in fact, that's what 11 Labs is doing. They're saying that they're going to do 29 languages with a variety of synthetic voices. I do think, though, that you could use those synthetic, inspired by human voices to say, I really like listening to this person. What if they could speak Japanese? What if they could speak Swahili? What if they could speak Spanish? And I think that that has a tremendous possibility behind it, where you don't have to lose a single person's job that currently exists, and you can augment the existing capabilities out to, when it comes to like dubs for movies, dubs as in a movie has been dubbed over from the source language to a different language. Apparently certain language pairs do not have a tremendous number of people. And so like, if I'm listening to this movie that was in source language of whatever, a Japanese to English movie, or an English to Japanese, or a this to that, whatever it ends up being, like, that country only has so many voice actors and I keep hearing the same voices. Well, something like 11 Labs could help give some variety to it while hopefully still maintaining the humanity wherever possible. So I think that this, much like we've talked about in the programming space, can be an augmentative tool instead of replacing people. It won't be used today. They're going to try to immediately get rid of all of the paid people as fast as they can. But I think it can and should be appropriately used to augment people's capabilities.
I mean, one of the things that Spotify highlighted in their press release is that this will allow far more works to reach this format, because it is very expensive to have someone narrate your 12-hour book, and it takes a lot of time. It's a 2-month turnaround because of the demand, and they've got to get studio time, or it's their home studio, and it all has to be edited together. Whereas here, it could potentially be turned around much faster and much cheaper. OpenAI does have a service on there where anyone can go and basically sell their voice acting abilities as a model. So you go in and you read their training material, which they then build the model, and then you get paid every time someone uses that model. So they have that. I don't actually know, but I do know how much it costs to use these models. So I can't imagine that this is generating a sustainable income for someone. Now, if a giant celebrity went in there, if Scarlett Johansson finally went in there and put her voice, I could imagine her, generating several hundred thousands, low millions a year, but that money is arguably kind of inconsequential for her and just sucks. All that money was going to other voice artists before then.
Sure, I could be making hundreds of thousands to millions a year on this voice. What do you think, everybody? Let us know in the comments. Do I have the silky voice of an angel? Should I be narrating your audiobooks? Should 11 Labs be taking my voice and turning it into audiobooks? I mentioned dubbing, by the way. 11 Labs actually does have an option for dubbing videos into other languages as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
They also allow you to describe a voice. So you can describe the character and they'll create that voice.
That's right. I tried doing that for, we showed off Gerblin on the podcast a while ago. I used that to make just like a creepy little guy type voice. And I was pretty happy with what came out. I think it's very hard to have a voice in your head and then have exactly that made just by virtue of description with words. But what came out was absolutely in the lines of like what I had written out of the description, which I think is very, very cool.
And if they continue to evolve this format, there's sort of like endless possibilities where, again, like you sort of mentioned the translation into any language. So, okay, yeah, this is this text, but I'd like to hear it in this language. Maybe I'm trying to learn that language, or maybe it is the language that I speak. Oh, I would like a G version of this because we're going to listen on the family road trip. And so can you please just like edit out anything that's not appropriate?
Oh, that's a really fun idea. I've seen a couple of like YouTube clips of, especially, God, what was it? Shaun of the Dead, I think, or like any of that trilogy of movies where they took all of the cursing and then replaced it with what was the TV safe version. So instead of yelling the Lord's name in vain, you hear a guy go peas and rice as he like is jumping or what have you. Yeah, and between that and then also AI like changing how video can look, you could have things make the voices or the lips match the G-rated version of what somebody ends up saying. Have we been doing that for any of my filthy speech on any of these podcasts?
We have not. We do have the ability to do that, but we have not.
Okay.
We have not as of
He's just been bleeping me about every 5 minutes.
But it could the format could rapidly evolve, and it's also interesting. The old timey radio drama really does not exist anymore. Because we have TV and we have movies.
No, we have podcasts. What are you talking about? The old timey radio drama is podcasts. Not necessarily. I mean, we're talking here, and this is a podcast, but like there are narrative-driven podcasts out there. It's absolutely the same thing.
Well, it's not nearly as big, right? I'm thinking of like War of the Worlds, sort of these produced
right. This isn't
radio
tuning into it, right?
Yeah, but I can also imagine. Okay, I want to listen to the book, but I want to listen to a radio production, radio dramatization of this story, and it being compelling. It's easy to understand. It's compelling, but the voice actors. I don't know how much longer they exist.
I do think, like with coding, like with journalism, like with all of these other tasks, we might see some companies trying to get rid of as many people as they can, but I continue to believe that is short-sighted, and we will see a correction back to the point where this is a tool. This is not supposed to replace everybody. Less people might have a job. There might be less space for junior people in that field. I'm thinking especially of coding here. But I do think that we are eventually going to settle into this is a tool that helps people. It is not a replacement for people. A sort of case in point, there is a article that we were looking at. It says, meet the journalists training AI models for Meta and OpenAI. And this is a company called Outlier, which is owned by a different company called Scale AI, one that I think everyone here should become familiar with. They are a large company that basically helps make the training data that goes into these large language models by the folks like Meta or OpenAI or presumably Mistral and so on, Anthropic, all of these big players. If they're not using specifically Scale AI or one of its sub companies, they're doing something very much like it, which is to say, take a whole bunch of data and have people classify it or write up variations of it or score things or whatever. And then that goes into the training data for the large language model to make it more aligned with the company's ethos and belief system, or trying to smooth off whatever rough edges of, it keeps talking about things that's not supposed to, or it is not answering these things correctly, depending on any kind of bias or objective truth underlying whatever correct looks like. But journalists, something that we've mentioned previously of possibly being in a lot of trouble as it relates to their overlord companies saying, we don't need people doing this anymore. It's journalism. Journalism's dead. Now we have a lot of journalists helping train the AI that is, in many cases, being used to put them out of a job. And it feels a little, it doesn't feel great to me to see people training their replacements for any job, let alone this type of job.
I have a sister who's a NBC news anchor, And so I can tell you that they are definitely talking about AI, and that community is very concerned that we don't know how much longer this is going to last. It feels like it's being replaced. They feel like they're seeing jobs go away in the journalism industry. We had this story, this is a while ago, about a piece of software used for like local news agencies producing stories, replacing very large groups of people. Right. But that whole sort of
that's been happening pre-AI, where a couple very large companies will have basically the exact same copy being sent out to local stations all over the U.S. That's not AI.
With radio. That happened with radio, right? It's like the Clear Channel model.
Yeah, happened with video news as well, where it's not local reporting. It's one company saying this is the line to toe. Please spread things in, whatever bias, whatever underlying motive that they want of, let's push this particular kind of narrative. That's already controlled by a very small number of groups. So journalism, in terms of the guy with the little notepad going around and asking people questions like there is still local journalism. There's still journalism in general. But a lot of what people might think of as journalism has been already centralized down to a very small number of, quote unquote, sources. And now that just is being either augmented or replaced via AI. Is this just the next step of the death knell that's already been going? Because you mentioned this sister of yours working as a news anchor. Is this a new conversation, or is this an evolution of the conversation?
It is an accelerating conversation, right? So like we've seen the downfall of newspapers. That happened before AI, right? Like all of a sudden, like, okay, people don't want to receive, or some do, but the majority don't want to receive this big newspaper. And so they couldn't afford to keep these, the large journalism staff on. And again, now we're just buying all our articles from the one national syndicator of news, et cetera. So we saw that. And that was because of just digital platforms, because people are reading the news on the web, and there's less money.
And some of those have shuttered as well since.
So that happened, and then the news, perhaps unsurprisingly, it caters to an older audience, an aging audience that is aging out. And just in general, the younger people don't like to turn on the nightly news. They don't find it interesting. Why? Because they're getting their news from other places, or enough news from other sources.
Totally unbiased news from TikTok.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking back to and I imagine it's been going on forever, but like with the Daily Show, there was some study 90% of millennials get all of their news from the Daily Show. And I'm sure that's not the case anymore, but so it's just an evolution. But the concern is now is it's really going fast now. We were already on this death march, and now it's it was like a light sprint, and it's a jog, and now we're borderline, just full out going towards our inevitable end.
So we've got the podcasters, ourselves included, and we have audiobook narrators and people dubbing movies. So everyone who speaks is going out of a job.
Yep,
You're saying that everyone who drives, everyone who writes, going out of a job.
Yep, done.
We've talked about this before, but what is your current thought as it relates to coders? Are we... Because I know you're slinging some code these days as well. I also do. Slinging code is definitely the term that everyone uses. I'm banging my hands on the keyboard every now and then as well. Do you think that we are about to be out of a job? Is that a conversation that's accelerating? Is this being embraced as a tool more rapidly? Does it really just depend on the individual company? What do you see as the future within this sort of industry?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because this is the industry that we should know best. Because we literally live every day in it. And I am so far from a definitive answer on in 2 years will a substantial amount of programming jobs be gone. I had a relative ask me now. I was coding's very recently asked me, so coding's essentially dead? Our kids shouldn't get degrees in computer science anymore? Am I following the news correctly here?
Right. And that's an interesting timescale, because I don't feel like my job is about to go away. But I also, if you were to say right now, should my currently a 3-year-old be fast tracked toward a CS department?
Yeah.
I don't know if I would say yes or no. At one point, I'd say, yeah, I like this industry quite a bit. I think it'd be a very reasonable place to be spending one's education. Honestly, for 15 plus years from now to be just entering into the college age, is that something that I'd be making a push for? At this point in time, I don't know. On the 5-year time scale, I'd say yes, and it's absolutely going to be harder because it already is harder. Not just from macroeconomic scales of we're kind of tightening things up. There's not a tremendous amount of hiring, especially for junior employees. I think some of that not hiring of junior employees is because of AI. But on a 5-year timescale, there still is room for a set of junior programmers. What happens 10, 15, 20 years from now?
So first, I kind of disagree that the current hiring crunch on junior engineers is because of AI. I think it is just a macroeconomic thing. We saw a huge boom during COVID because money was free, more or less, right? You could take a loan for free. And when we say money is free, so it was just flowing. At the company we were at, I don't know, they tripled in size during that period of time because they're taking advantage of the current market conditions. And then it stopped and money became expensive again. And when money was expensive, everyone had to reduce back down to more or less their size before COVID. And so there are a number of studies, and you can see the numbers of, okay, here's how many engineers were employed before COVID. Here's during COVID. Here's after COVID. We're kind of returning to the mean. So I'm not sure about that. And my biggest reservation in 2 years is 25% of junior engineers' jobs replaced. There's very little that the best in class AI tools today can do 100% unassisted. You just, from a programming perspective.
Yeah.
I've dreamt up this new feature.
Especially that 100%.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, so we've trashed Devin, the first AI software engineer on this podcast before, cannot do 100% of basically any task.
Yes. So that gets me to my immediate no. I don't think in 2 years and in 5 years, I don't know, maybe. But I use these tools every single day and they get better every single day. And the quality of that first pass, that one shot where you say something and then it comes out, is getting better and better and better. And as you use them, a lot of these tools allow you the ability to tune them a little bit. Be like, no, I like this written like this. I'd like when you separate the functionality like this. Here are some good or great examples to use. And as you start tuning it, it gets better and better and better. And my setup is pretty good. And we're getting into the 90% on getting things through. Now there is a filter there.
It's not 100%.
It's not 100%.
Needs you there to watch over it and to fix things. First to break it down, because I know what it's capable of. So I've got to break it down into small enough tasks that this is something it could actually do. Although I use AI to assist me in breaking it down. Sure. And then I watch it do it, and then I have to go in and test it and validate it. In which it's, you can ask it to validate, and it will say, oh yeah, I checked it, it's working. And you can ask it to write tests for itself. Right. That is way below 90% in it validating its own output. But by the way, junior engineers. This agentic revolution, though, is very much giving it the tools to inspect and retrospect and iterate, I think. So there's where some of that progress is coming from, for sure.
But junior engineers, their output, same thing, it's way below 90% that it just works perfectly. It's production, enterprise production ready code coming out the first time.
I'll write enterprise ready code. My first pass on anything, AI assisted or otherwise, never, look, if anything runs the first time that you wrote it, you get suspicious. You never trust, obviously I did it right. You go, that probably shouldn't have just run the first time. Maybe that's just me. I hope it's not.
I saw a tweet from the CTO of Coinbase And he was talking about integrating AI tooling with their dev team. He mentioned, everyone has cursor licenses, which is a popular developer. It's called an IDE, integrated developer environment, but
the program you use to do programming.
Yeah, Microsoft Word for writing code. So everyone's using the AI version of that. And he said the next thing that they're working on is anytime someone creates a ticket. And so when you're working on code, most of your code gets broken down in these tickets, or there's something that's called user stories. But it describes it's
the sticky note up on the board of I need to do this thing.
It's the feature.
It to do, in progress, or done? Yeah.
In general, it's the feature that you're trying to build. So his thing is that starting very soon, they're going to attach to every ticket basically, I won't use the technical language, but a version, an implementation of that was done by the AI. So as you as an engineer, you're going to get the ticket describing the thing that you want and the already implemented version by the AI.
And the idea being you go into it and then fix or tweak it as necessary.
Well, you start there. That's that like maybe it makes it faster because the first thing you're going to do is check to see, did the AI do it correctly? Oh, no, they didn't. Okay, then in that case, I'm going to engage. And that over time, by having this workflow, the feedback that I'm going to be giving to the AI, you missed this. Oh, you're not following the latest rules here. Oh, you're not using the right dependencies, etc. It's going to get better.
Give me that. I'm extremely excited about that prospect. I really love this idea of here, we already broke down this whole epic into features, into stories, into tasks. And then here's the first pass at everything. And then now you just have to go in and let's call it 70% of the way there for each of them. And that's at the task level. And then at the product backlog item level, it's like 60%. That the feature level, it's kind of like a 50-40, and the epic, well, we're only like 30% of the way there. But wow, that would be so much of the way there really quickly. And I do think that like the technologies exist for that. That's just throw more agents at it, make it more aware of this, and it needs the context of this ticket is part of this feature, is part of this epic, is part of this initiative for the company, and like, this is how this all kind of relates together. And then the little agents go out and say, well, I just ran these tests and this failed, and I need to write the tests based off of, I just looked it up on the ticket of this is what's supposed to be in here. That's extremely exciting to me. I really like that idea.
I like that idea a lot too.
Now, let's take everything you just said and bring that back to Spotify and the audiobooks narrated by. Take everything that we just said and bring that back to the journalists that have been being put out of a job as it relates to doing journalism. Instead of get rid of journalists, shouldn't this instead be, hey, journalist who has been assigned a story to cover, here is a first pass at it, and the AI cites its sources, and now you get to go and do primary source checking and actual editing and changing things around. I guess that's more of an editor's job than a journalist. But the point is, like, is that not a empowering tool that people could be using instead of let's get rid of people and remove the quote unquote human soul from the experience? Shouldn't we be doing the exact same thing that you just described and that I'm really excited about for coding for all of these other purposes where thus far we've mostly just talked about the loss of jobs?
Well, I think we should, and I think we will, but the issue is that, really what we're doing in this interim step, assuming, and maybe the final step, but at a minimum, the interim step is making these people far more efficient. So great. A journalist can now write 5 times the amount of articles they previously were able to write for the newspaper, but the newspaper can only handle so many articles. There is a cap on the number of articles.
Which means you then need less journalists.
Yes. And we see this in technology.
But we're not getting rid of journalists. As a whole, we are making a number of them more efficient. Same thing with the potential junior programmer type scenario where, we don't need as many of them to do the same amount of work.
Right. And we see this with a lot of the kind of AI first companies that are starting from AI, not the companies that have not Zoom, which is now an AI first company, but I'll take Midjourney as an example. They're a company that probably has one of the best, if not the best, image generator. It's an incredibly small team, producing hundreds of millions, if not, $1 billion valuation that previously would have been more or less impossible for a team of that size. I mean, I think for a long time they had like 3 engineers. I think it is a little bit bigger now, but I don't think it's much bigger.
Their whole deal, besides the actual technology of making the images, is drawn from the tremendous amount of data that they get from people having used the platform. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's an engine that runs itself at this point, other than the actual technology of making the images. Data. Yes. People need to give their feedback to things. That's why Scale AI is using a bunch of journalists to make something, to make AI-driven journalism better. That's why you need all of the existing audiobooks and audio out there to understand how a good audiobook is narrated and how it flows. I think that it continues to be important to have people involved, not just in the loop of an individual task to say, was this done correctly? What would you change about it? Which I think, especially that last part, what would you change about this thing I already did? We're going to see more and more of that across all of these industries. But you still need somebody at the start and or end of this that is directing it, that is going to be the consumer of the output. That's the one of the 2 L's in large language model. It's dealing with language, and people are the ones that benefit from that language, whether it be a slightly more optimized news feed, or an audiobook, or a podcast that you might be listening to and really enjoying and possibly subscribing to if you aren't already, for example. But you need people there, ultimately. This can't just be for nothing.
But you need less people because of the AI to do the same amount of output. So then you have the opportunity.
What happens to all those other people then?
Well, so the companies that exist today without AI, as they embrace AI, they will become more efficient. And so then the question is, do they expand the scope of their work? Do they start writing more articles? They start producing more journalistic content? Do they start creating more audiobooks? That's one opportunity. And the other opportunity is more companies can stand up, because it's also now, we've lowered the cost of entry for the next great journalistic news organization to enter in the market. And
it doesn't need to be some huge behemoth with a giant printing press and national distribution. It can be 4 guys and gals and whatevers that just want to say, we're going to go out and do hyper local, actual real journalism. I'm going down the street and interviewing my neighbor, and my God, we're going to have a newspaper for my street. We can do that. And you're right about that barrier to entry. So I mentioned this, I don't know, a half dozen-ish episodes ago, the Jevons paradox, where you have increased efficiency leading to more consumption of a resource. Mm-hmm. I think people can be that resource, where we talk a lot about the potential loss of jobs as it relates to the AI revolution. And that's correct. We are losing a bunch of individual jobs. But because of that lowered barrier to entry, I think that paradox comes into play, where we can have economically viable jobs pop up more and more for people who are using these technologies. It's not just a huge media conglomeration gets rid of 30% of its workforce because they're going to be slashing people regardless. That's going to happen. But then you can have more smaller groups pop up more easily that can hire the same number of people or more people as a result. There is going to be a rough period, I think, where there have been more firings than more of these new things popping up. But I do think it is going to equalize. And just as I'm excited for the tasks to be given that first pass to help make my coding job easier, I think that the tools are there or nearly there to make this across a lot of other industries as well. And I don't think it needs to be all doom and gloom. I really do think that we're going to see more people able to do these creative endeavors because of this set of tooling.
Yeah, there's someone else said it, so I can't take credit for it, but they said that, if you see AI as a way of doing more, you tend to have a very positive outlook on things. And if you see AI as a way of doing less, meaning, all right, well, we don't need that anymore, then you tend to have a very sort of doom and gloom. And so the trick is to figure out how you can do more with it. What are the opportunities that are open up now? And yeah, in my mind, they're virtually unlimited, if not actually unlimited.
I think it has to do with your outlook sort of on life in general, where if you see jobs going away, if you see that this specific implementation of a slice of the workforce of the United States, and you say, well, shoot, that's gone. I guess now X% of people just don't have a job anymore. That's never been true before. And there's no reason to think that'll be true again. When the printing press came out, sure, it put most scribes out of a job, but those people didn't just give up, lay down, and die. They got other jobs and other things happened whenever...
Wait, you're saying humanity continued after that moment in time?
Believe it or not, humanity did continue. Whenever we started making cars instead of people just having horses or whatever for like transportation around, believe it or not, we all adapted as a society to that new technology that made things much more efficient in ways, got rid of other jobs. There were way less jobs for people who cared for and bred horses and so on. But look at this entire industry that came up out of nothing. Same thing with AI. There are a lot of jobs that exist now that are going to go away, that have started going away. But that doesn't mean that there isn't going to be something that replaces it. Just because coal mining doesn't have as many people in it, because solar has been exploding in popularity over the last, like, especially 5 to 10 years, doesn't mean that all the coal miners can't have jobs anymore. Some of them are getting into solar. Some of them are doing other things instead. Some, a very small number, probably just say, well, I guess it's just welfare for me at this point. And like they cease becoming productive members of society. Some people will always just fall out of the system. But most people are going to adapt. If we get fully self-driving vehicles, truly every mile, not just the on the highway, it's construction zones. Cars aren't, Waymos are not being pulled over by cops for going the wrong way down a construction zone, that kind of thing. Let's say we completely solve that. That's 10% of the US workforce. That is a ton of people. That's so many people who just drive a thing for a living. If every forklift driver and truck driver and taxi driver and limo driver and whatever, if all of them were put out of a job, hopefully not all at once, but over a period of time, they don't just lay down and die. They're going to find something else to do. And so I think as a whole, I'm starting to push back against any AI doomerism, if you want to call it that. I don't know what's going to replace it. There's going to be a variety of jobs and a variety of different technologies that continue to emerge and opportunities. But anyone who loses their job due to AI, I'm, of course, sorry to see anyone who is put into any economic hardship at any point. That stinks. But it doesn't mean that there isn't something else out there.
And Daniel, if our listeners want to know more about what else may or may not be out there, do you have any recommendations on actions they could take to stay in the loop on these developments?
They're going to have to learn, like I'd say weekly, maybe even twice a week.
Yes.
Of what the latest and greatest is in this industry and also as it relates to other industries. There's probably some sort of, it's got to be AI generated at this point, like a podcast or an audiobook. Like a short form audiobook that comes out twice a week that you could subscribe to.
Yes.
On, we were talking about Spotify earlier. You could subscribe on Spotify or YouTube.
Yes.
There's a whole bunch of different podcast networks out there. I think there might be.
What would you call something like this? Like if you were to give it a title.
Let's say they might be self-aware. I think that's a really snappy title.
Great time. Great name.
Yeah. What if you did subscribe, if you aren't already, to They Might Be Self-Aware on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. We've got YouTube if you want to see us. We're pretty good to look at. I'm pretty good to look at anyways. I make some funny faces. Hunter made a funny face earlier, especially in our last episode. Really good face. You should go back and watch for that face. I do think that you could be subscribed to us. You could give us thumbs ups and stars, depending on the platform that you're looking at.
But
you
surely
could leave
that's
comments that we'll read.
Really expensive to do something like that, Daniel. It's got to be like...
This is not OpenAI's Super Plus mega tier of $200 a month. In fact, They Might Be Self-Aware, the podcast that you're listening to right now, that you are almost done listening to because we're just wrapping up, was available for the low, low price of not any money whatsoever. We're doing this for free. Wow. You're welcome. Enjoy it. You did. And if you continue to enjoy it, let us know in the comments. Be subscribed. Tell your friends. Tell your family. Put up some flyers on electrical poles, or, you know, the big wooden... Yeah, those electrical poles, right? A little flyer. Hey, have you listened to this podcast? Ka-chunk. I think you should be doing those things. Spread the word, because we are that hyper-local journalism in a sense. Hyper-local in that I'm in my room and Hunter's in a room in a totally different state. But the point is that we're not owned by those big conglomerates, and you could be listening to us, and you should be listening to us, because we are maybe self-aware.
Thank you, everyone, and until next time.
They might be self-aware.